So background on me, I'm a Mr. Fix-It guy. So I fix banks, I do large-scale transformation, I do re-engineering, I have a background in finance, risk, ops, and tech, and I work across organizations to make change happen. What I'm going to talk to you today about is I was in Las Vegas, and Milan and Benjamin saw what I talked about there, and they thought, oh, that's pretty neat. You should come here and talk to you as well about the same sort of thing. So I'm going to talk to you about what I call digital process management, which is about using metrics and analytics on an end-to-end basis to measure the process, measure the client experience, transform the client journey to make the change happen. Because people can't afford to change it all at once. They need to selectively pick where they're going to make change. They need to reuse existing assets. They kind of need to renovate. So instead of total white sheet redesign, you're renovating. So I'd like to have that type of a conversation with you today about renovation in large-scale organizations to make change happen. So the title is Digital Process Management using inline client experience metrics and analytics to execute transformational change. Okay. Now, if you agree that this is a time like no other, like the status quo just totally isn't safe anymore, that the client journey design is the new battleground, and that digital disruption is driving significant change across many industries, and that operating models are being redesigned and transformed, and that collaboration and working together across an organization is a prerequisite for success, and that analytics is driving change like no other time in our lifetime, then you're in the right room. Okay? So what you need then is a way to rapidly change, to take people's predisposition not to change and turn it on its side to get change to happen. So you need to get a way to change, redesign and renovate, select certain technologies and implement those technologies in some logical sequence, and use analytics to change people's minds. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. All right? So everybody's got a Venn diagram. So last night I was up at 2 a.m. making this Venn diagram for you. Okay? The Venn diagram that I'm talking about is the classic people, process, technology Venn diagram, and I believe it's becoming very permeable. In fact, so permeable, it's soluble. You've got robots coming in to replace people. You've got analytics and artificial intelligence coming in to automate processes. You've got BPM software that is so intuitive now, it's very easy to configure. So that classic people, process, technology dichotomy we all grew up in is converging into one big blur. And that's probably an interesting thing to think about as we execute change, because there are many ways to skin the rabbit, right? So you can invest in technology, invest in analytics, but you actually need to get the organization to make the right smart investments at the right time. And so those four things about business strategy, talent and culture, technology enablement, and analytics insight are the cornerstones of what I'm going to talk to you today about how you can start to execute that change. But then what do we really mean by an operating model? A lot of people talk about we got to change our operating model. Okay, well, just for definition perspective, I mean the full end-to-end operating model. Not the little website, not the little call center, but thinking about how you really treat a client from research right through to execution and fulfillment. It brings together all elements of transaction processing systems, data repositories, mobile, front office, use of third parties. And there's the questions on this page are tough questions. Which segments are our most valuable segments? Do we want to, what impact does social media have on us? How do we use that as an asset? What analytics should we know about our clients to compete? Should we build or acquire or partner with somebody? That extended ecosystem, everybody is up for it now. It used to be just outsourcing, but now you have full-on people taking over full-on parts of people's processes in a very meaningful way. So choose your partners wisely. So this is what I mean by an operating model being redesigned or renovated. Okay? Now, there's 3 paradigm shifts that are driving this. There's a market-based paradigm shift, there's an execution-based paradigm shift, and there's a redesign, not re-engineer. I'm going to go through those and just explain those in the subsequent slides. But in a nutshell, you've got Walmart on the left and Amazon on the right, and you've got people taking over other people's business. You could have put any bank there with any fintech, you could have put other firms there, but basically you've got the new world and the old world, and the old world is trying to catch up to the new world. And the stock performance looks like that, or worse, for old world companies that don't adapt. The execution-based paradigm shift is you used to have tech, ops, business being separate silos, and the communication was not very good. And you also had waterfall methods versus agile and scrum methods to execute. Well, your methods of execution and your methods of collaboration require you, because those 3 parts of people, process, and technology are converging, the domains of people's expertise has to converge. And so you need to be able to work across the functional silos that we have. And the bottom one is design, not re-engineer. If you think about classic re-engineering, you want to fix Form 32B. Form 32B bugs me, I want to change the data field, I want to capture different data. Well, that's just a waste of time. Because you may actually be able to get rid of Form 32B by doing a digital, thoughtful redesign of the way the process should work. So all of a sudden, instead of re-engineering, you're redesigning with what's capably possible today. And so I really hate it when I walk into organizations and they're just doing a whole bunch of process maps, and they're wasting their time and money. Because if they actually thought about what technology can do for them today, they might actually throw away 2/3 of their old process. And the example I give you is mortgage origination. If you actually redesign mortgage origination right, you get the real estate listing digitally, you get the property and title details digitally, you get the credit bureau information digitally, you get the driver's license ID digitally, you get their payroll data digitally, and you can probably make a decision on somebody for a mortgage in under a minute. So all of a sudden, the classic paradigm of designing this paper-based paradigm of processing is no longer the way to design. And so all of a sudden, your world changes. And just think about that in everything. Insurance claims, healthcare, teleco. All of a sudden, the paper-based paradigm that we could have as our frame of reference is where we have to move away from and do redesign. Okay, so that's what I'm basically going to take you through a little bit. If you don't believe me that this digitization thing is real, believe that. People who are digital masters have 9% more revenue and grow, 9% more revenue growth and are 23% more profitable. Companies with advanced analytics outperform the S&P by 64%. Those who have end-to-end effective process management grow 42% faster and are 28% more efficient. The bottom one, if a bank actually spent money transforming themselves, they reduce their back office costs by 80%, they reduce their application portfolio by 70%, and their time to market is cut by 70%, and their operating income increased by 30%. This is meaningful change and meaningful transformation if you adopt it. Okay? So, clients are driving this. They're more informed, they're more mobile, they're more savvy, they're actually very intelligent now. So, traditional businesses are being disrupted. Leaders measure segment performance, they know where they make their money, they measure their operational journeys, they measure their employee performance and experience from a client perspective. So I talk in tandem about client experience and employee experience. Because if an employee is not confident in front of a client, it's a disaster. So you actually have to think about how you design the tools for the employee to work better in front of the client. So I did some work at a bank where we looked at their sales process in the front office. In the front office in the bank, the branch people turn over about a third a year. And they probably do 2 or 3 mortgages a month. And they're spending all this money training all these people on how to do these complicated mortgages in the old paper days paradigm. Well, they were wasting their money because they didn't do it frequent enough to make it stick. And by the time they got to do their second one, they'd forgotten what they'd been trained on 3 months ago. So basically, they were wasting their training dollars. What was required was an operating model change to actually provide them the support they needed to deliver that mortgage confidently in front of the client. And so that's a bit of technology, that's a bit of 1-800, ask a friend, but just basically change the way you deliver that service and use technology to help you deliver that service in front of the client. The other thing I'll say is that the distinction between products and services is blurring. So the way you deliver the service, part of the digital experience, is part of this product now. So clients don't look at you as, I got a mortgage. They look at you, did I have a good experience while I got that mortgage? And that's what I evaluate. And so we really need to think about not just the product features, but the delivery features and the service features and the process features and how it actually happened, the client journey in front of the client. And so now you see that designing that correctly on an end-to-end basis can really be competitive. So, what I mean by inline client experience measurement is taking snapshots about what is happening on the end-to-end process and drawing out operational statistics. So what I did at one bank was I took the various databases that were all over the bank, across all the transaction processing systems, and I linked up that data and identified certain metrics, numerators and denominators, average time to first approval, first pass auto approval, time to decision, and I measured it from a client perspective. And you can imagine that's pretty controversial because people would say, well, that's not my accountability, that metric. It's a joint metric. It's between me and adjudication, or it's between me and operations, or it's between, yeah, but it's a client metric. So then I had to set up an operational excellence committee across the bank to talk about these metrics so we could actually focus on the client. So I transcended the functional disciplines. I had a tech guy, the ops guy, the product people, the risk people, all in the same room looking at the same metrics to talk about their end-to-end metrics. And that changed the dialogue. And that allowed us to have a conversation about, well, what's really broken in our operating model and what should we fix? And that allowed us to figure out where to spend our money. So the more complicated slide is this one. This is the one that Milan and Benjamin really liked, so I put it back in. I didn't have it in my last version. Thought it was a bit busy, but they like it. So if you think about a classic journey, and I know this is very highly stylized, but you've got the operational execution, you got insights that you want around the client. What is our error rate? Why do people leave and how? What are our rework cycles and times? Who delivers well? Which is the best way to communicate with the client? How do they prefer to be communicated with? All those questions from a client perspective with statistics and operational metrics that you track to determine where you want to invest, how you want to make the change. Is this segment attractive? Is it big enough? Is it something we want to spend our money on? What are the client irritants that we give to each segment? So if you do some research on mortgages again, because everybody can get mortgages, a first-time home buyer is very unsure. They've never bought a mortgage, they want lots of hand-holding, they want lots of research, they want to be hugged. A person who's refinancing could care less about all that. They want to know what the rate is and when am I approved. An investor cares even less about that. He wants to know at the margin what his rate is and how much collateral he has to put down. And so you see, if you actually start to think about the segments, they want something different from the journey in each case. So you might actually design it differently based on the profile of the individuals. Okay? So, between a rock and a hard place, failure is not an option. That was actually rocks, by the way. Those are from the desert somewhere. An execution-based paradigm shift where outside-in digital design is fundamental to the rethink of the end-to-end process. You have to think from outside into your organization. Too much and so often, people think about my world and how my world is going to be impacted, as opposed to saying, how do I actually prepare the organization to deal with this client? As opposed to, geez, it's my little department, how am I going to deal with it? And that's just the wrong answer in today's age. So create joint end-to-end teams, combine business, tech, and security and marketing and sales disciplines, syndicate the functional business vision, develop transformational specialists, and if you do this well, you'll actually have higher market valuations and you'll actually be more profitable than your peers. Firms that actually have effective process management in this regard grow 42% faster and are 28% more efficient. But you have to actually want it, because this stuff is hard. So you have to work across the silos, connect the disciplines to transform and redesign. So operating models need to change. Process tweaks do not create significant value. Just changing a form or a part of a process without thinking about the client experience is a waste of money. Culture and behavior change is different because people have a paper-based paradigm in their head. And so you have to move them from the paper-based paradigm to the digital paradigm and say, did you know that technology can do this? At one client, I'm using a piece of software to digitally capture the processes, capture what people do on their screen. It gives me a BPMN process model. I'll use that output to hand it off to a piece of robotic process automation software to automate the process, and I'll change the execution cycle to about 24 weeks for a significant change in their operations. That's what's possible in today's age with technology. And that's just the transformation part of it. That's not the client experience part of it. That's just to make the change happen. Okay, so what do I mean by digital transformation? I mean service design, I mean front to back, I mean end to end, and I mean to align strategy with execution. Okay, a lot of people talk digital fairly opaquely. I'm being very explicit here. Designing it with the human and customer at the center. Think about all the internal interactions of systems, processes, and policies orchestrated for the client experience. Thinking about it end to end, and making sure I know who I'm going to serve, what that implies for my data architecture, what that implies for my process architecture, what that implies for my business rules, my policies, and my talent. So it's a fairly holistic conversation. Okay? Now, here's how I would think about it. You start with the customer, you understand your vision, you design and minimize complexity. You do it in small increments because nobody can afford a big bang. Nobody can afford to do it all. You have smart investments because you actually know, you've measured, you have analytics about where your most pain is, where you're most vulnerable, and what the clients really want. And then you work on change adoption and awareness engagement, and you lead with analytics. So the story I told in Vegas was that I had a little project going where I had a little team, and I set up a little lab. And I grabbed all this data, and every 2 weeks I published information about the process. And so much so that I had more SVPs and EVPs joining my steering committee to hear what Neal had found in 2 weeks. And we had all these people piling on because I was telling them stuff about their process. Not me, that they didn't know. They didn't know. They didn't know they had 6 times resubmits. They didn't know that their first pass auto approval rate was 14%. They didn't know on average that it took 27 days to approve a mortgage. They didn't know that their operations group cycled something 3 or 4 times before it got finally done. All that information was used in the steering committee to determine what we wanted to fix and the sequence we wanted to fix it in, because we couldn't afford to do it all. But by using that information around the client journey, we were able to have a thoughtful conversation about what to change and what the sequence of the change was. So, it's pretty radical, but you have a whole bunch of SMEs in your organization who really know the organization. You got to bring them along. You can't throw them away because they know where the bodies are buried, but you also have to show them a future. So you need a vision, you need a plan, you need a future, and then you bring the SMEs along. You can't abandon the SMEs because they really know. So, if you think about it, you must clearly understand your target segments, your value, your brand, and how that must be aligned. I've had people say, well, we can just fake the brand. No, you can't. Because in today's age, all you need is one Twitter handle or one Twitter comment on this was a terrible experience, it sucked, and all of a sudden your brand starts to erode. So You got to be careful about that. You measure and understand the client's perceived value, you align brand with client experience, and you automate where possible to create efficiencies. You make this program pay for itself. Okay? You don't have to have a lot of money. You just, because the money and the funding, the fat are sitting there. You can save 30 to 40% if you do the proper redesign, because you've got digital technology working for you that is changing that paper-based paradigm, and the money is there to fund this. It's not that outrageous. You just need to get everybody aligned. A lot of the balkanization costs money. A lot of the breaks cost money. A lot of the rework costs money. So if you actually call that out, say, we can pay for this. We can pay for this by automating. We can throw a few robots in there. Robot is about 1/5 of the cost of a human and works 24/7 and doesn't make mistakes. So if you can actually identify the right spot to put these investments in, you can actually get pretty good productivity out of them. Okay? Have a clear technology strategy. You can't fix it all, so you got to fix it in spots. You have to starve non-critical applications. The discipline to actually say no to people, that's not on strategy, that's not critical, that's not important to the client journey. We're going to let that one go. You put your money where your strategy is, and you move away from the sense of entitlement that most people have about, well, we had that money last year. Well, actually, you had that money last year, it was a bad decision. So let's talk about the right decision for the client, and let's change that decision. Okay? So design for the client. You really need to think about client journey, the interconnection points, triggers, life events, moments of truth, and irritants that really impair client engagement. You have to need to establish a baseline for the client. So once I established the baseline in front of the executive team at this bank, it was very easy to have the conversation. Well, do you really want your client to resubmit 6 times? Do you really want to take 27 days to approve a mortgage? Do you really want that to be your reputation in the marketplace, that you're the slowest one on the street? Okay, now we have a good conversation. Okay, so I have this sort of notion, in God we trust, all others bring data, so I darken the skies with data and insight to change people's minds. And I really implore everybody to do that, because the person who has the best view of the process or the best view of the client experience can have the lead in making the change happen. And then you select certain applications to upgrade to create operational leverage. Operational leverage is when your revenue grows faster than your cost base. So you want to pick the right investments to make sure you have the right business case. So it's not a fanciful, let's just spend money. It's, if we spend this money, we expect this lift, we expect this return, we expect this performance, it'll have this impact. It's not a random act. It's a thoughtful renovation of existing infrastructures around the client journey to make the needed change happen. Now, it's not easy. So you need to take on the bear. You need to be brave and resourceful, okay? But that's where the fun is, isn't it? Like, that's where the fun is. If I sat there and just papered over what current people do, it wouldn't be any fun. So, simplify, automate, digitize, support, and enable. Enlist your technology. The barrier between technology and business and sales, there should be no barrier. You just bring the information together. You have the conversations. You agree what the good technology investments are. You actually talk about your process architecture. Process architecture is one of the least talked about subjects. How do we want this process to actually work end to end? What does that imply for our data architecture? What does that imply for our business rules? What does that imply for our decision rules? How do we bring all that together and have the good conversation? So I did this piece of work where I took an inventory of the policies at one end and the policies at the other end, the risk policies as they were stated versus the business policies as were stated, and did a reconciliation of them on an end-to-end basis. It's like 12-gauge track beating 15-gauge track. It never quite aligned. And it was very insightful, because the business people go, well, that's what we always done. And the risk people go, well, that's not in policy. Or what is the exact policy? So you have a good conversation there if you actually do the work. And there's lots of gaps like that in organizations. And then tactically build selective automation, imaging, document management workflow based on known process gaps. Lever established standards, frameworks, and methods. I can't tell you how important having a standard operating model is. Standardized process for standardized work so you can get to reuse. So client onboarding or new account open should be standardized. It shouldn't be different for each product. So once you start to get to some standardization, the reuse and the leverage goes up. So you actually start to think about, well, if I spend money here, I solve 16 problems across various products because it's the right use of money. Or if I could change the way I fulfill and get a standard method of fulfillment with clients, then I could reuse the fulfillment method. Or if I could standardize on operational procedure or hiring procedures, I get leverage. So it's all about starting to get standard operating procedures and standardization. I do lead with analytics. I look past the clutter. I try to draw out the insightful commentary. I use metrics across a balanced scorecard. So I know that's old school, but balanced scorecard still works. You should have a client dimension, you should have a process dimension, cost efficiency. If you think about, a lot of people are too financially oriented, but you do need a balanced scorecard, but you also need to pay for this thing. So if I can't prove it to somebody that the investment makes sense, then I haven't done my job. Okay. Measure the process performance, the quality of the end-to-end service, and identify opportunities for improvement in new services or strategic areas of focus. Use internal and external information. So I've seen cases where we've used social media information to identify operational issues to come back in an organization and change them. Okay, so if somebody's complaining about X, use that information, bring it back, make the business case, do the math. Yep, it's worth it. Let's go after it. Lever internal communities. People actually want to do a good job. So if you can get your technology organization to actually take it on, all of a sudden you get a little flywheel effect. Everybody wants to get into it, and you get to make the change happen. Now, talent and culture. You have to change the way we change. So to change the way we change, you have to work across the silos. Waterfall delivery methodologies, by the time you get them done in today's day and age, the requirements specified, it just takes too long. So you've got to get to rapid or agile or scrum, or at least iterative techniques to deliver the change in versions so that you don't have this long time to results. And the idea of the minimum viable product, I know someone didn't like it yesterday, but the minimum change required to make an impact is a good way to think about it. Get the essence of what you need done, and then make it perfect in the next iteration, make it perfect in the next iteration, okay? So, you have to understand how much risk you want to take on. You have to understand your incentives and rewards. So how am I motivating my IT people? If they're motivated to protect their budget from last year, and just spend their budget from last year, versus deliver a business outcome, all of a sudden you get a change in behavior if the business and the IT people are jointly accountable for results. And so in one organization, I changed the way the strategic project office ran, and I had benefits realization plans with a benefit sponsor and a tech sponsor and a business sponsor accountable for the benefits. And so all of a sudden, the conversation about are we going to realize our benefits became a meaningful conversation. It engaged the business sponsor much more, it engaged the tech sponsor much more, and it made sure we had math and finance people verifying the business case to make sure it was truly doable. The rigor that we put into that stopped a lot of waste, because people go, okay, if I have to prove that this is really valuable, maybe I won't fight that, I'll just go do something else that I can definitely prove is more valuable. So all of a sudden, the wheat and the chaff start to separate. Okay? And you have to think about business rules, policies, decision criteria, and behavior to support the strategy. So making people agree that we are in a new world, that the world is changing, and they should get on with into the new world and leave the old world behind. And then you have to upgrade your hiring and training and talent to develop and retain the required talent. Most people are developing for mobile first and not trying to have a different application in mobile than in their non-mobile physical channel. So you're designing it so that it will work in both mobile and physical, and it just makes sense. Like, why would you not? Right? But that requires some design and some thinking. And set up alternative delivery execution models, digital adoption teams, client experience SWAT teams, deploy rapid agile tech change delivery management methods so that you can make an impact without having to have a monolithic project. Okay? So I'm strumming up now. Redesign operating models for the digital paradigm, assist leaders to embrace end-to-end redesign or renovation, plan for and realize efficiency and effectiveness, make it explicit, the gains you're going to get, help execute culture change, and bring digital capability, analytics, and client experience and operational excellence together, because that's measuring the inline client experience. So I apply operational analytics to digitally measure and manage processes to create insight to change the dialogue. I have thoughtful redesign around the client journey with a focus on delivering the right end-to-end client experience. And I blend technology, leadership, and pragmatic business savvy street smarts to make the change happen. I find some really crackerjack technology people who know what they're doing, and I enlist their help. And then if you do that well, you'll retain clients, grow revenue, protect the core, and you'll create operational leverage, which everybody loves, especially shareholders. Okay, that's the end of it. The pictures are from a guy who's now retired, and he's got his own little photography hobby. And so I asked him if I could use the pictures. They're quite spectacular. So, anyway, any questions? That takes me to where I'm supposed to be, right? There's a question over there. Yep.
Anticipating the first question, the slides will be available.